Yes.
We're live. Hey, everyone. So super excited to be here. This is the one that we've been waiting for a while. So I'm Courtney. This is Nils. We're going to be talking to you for the better part of your day, probably, considering how much we have to cover. So just while we're getting started, let's just wait for some people to show up, wait for everybody who's been so eagerly anticipating this webinar to come in and join us. So why don't you let us know in the chat where you're coming in from. I see we've already got some people here. Matthew, great to see you. Matthew always shows up to our webinar, so thank you for the loyalty, Matthew. And while you're waiting, just go ahead and click like on the video, because then you'll be able to see all of our subsequent content about Core Web Vitals. Hey, Demetrius from Chicago. Very nice. Nice to see you. All right, who else is joining us today? We've got Susie. Someone asked if this will be recorded. It will. It's being recorded as we speak. You can watch this anytime at the same link. So just to give a little bit of background while we're waiting for everyone to join in. Oh, hi, Lucia. Some background while we're waiting. Google has announced the Core Web Vitals update will be going live in May 2021. They gave us a ridiculous amount of notice about this, so that's how you know that it's like crazy important for you to actually get a jump on this before you get in trouble for not having done it. Who else is here? Matthew's from Canada. Hey, Canada. Chicago. I think we've got some France here. All right. We also had some really great questions pre-submitted that we are going to answer. Core Web Vitals is one of the topics that is a little bit more technical than some stuff that we've tackled in the past. We typically talk about just general SEO strategy, keyword strategy. Core Web Vitals is going to be a little bit more in-depth, and there's some very specific metrics that you have to think about when tackling Core Web Vitals. So as I said, we did get some questions submitted in advance, which is so great. I love when you guys do that. But this is why we're here. This is why it's a live session. If there's anything that we say today that's unclear for you, or if you want us to go into a little bit more detail, or if you've just had a question that you've been waiting to ask us, please don't be shy. Put it in the chat. We can tackle it. We're here for you. We're here to help you get ready. That's the whole point of this, so that you can really hit the ground running when Google does this May update. Oh, Texas, howdy, partner. That sounded not authentic at all. Sorry, I'm from Jersey. Looks like we've got a good amount of people. So yeah, don't forget, hit the like button on the video if you're enjoying the content. If you want to see what else we come up with, subscribe to our channel, of course, so you can always see all the new content that we have. But I think now's as good a time as any to get started. What do you think, Nils?
Sure, let's go.
Let's do it. All right, guys. Again, any questions that you have, even while we're talking, throw it into the chat, okay? Nils, take it away.
All right. So Core Web Vitals, the talk of town these days, especially when it comes to SEO, building websites, improving websites, getting websites to rank good. So I'll dive into what that means, Core Web Vitals. It's somewhat technical topic, of course. Well, pretty technical topic. I'll try to explain what it is also to non-technical people. Of course, it's a topic we can talk for hours and hours just about the metrics and the things that need to be measured. So somewhere I need to stay on the surface, just not to bore out most of the people in this chat. But yeah, I'll do my best to give the explain like I'm 5 version of it, and then obviously when there's questions, remarks, anything, just let us know in the comments, and we can answer or get in touch with you. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Just to kick it off, a very good resource is web.dev. So just type that in your browser and you'll get to a very good source of information. Core Web Vitals is a topic that Google sort of invented and brought into the world. And this resource is also hosted by them. So they regularly update this. So it's all about how to develop good websites. And that means good performing websites, or speedy websites, but just as much accessible websites, stuff like that. So this entire resource is not just about Core Web Vitals. Of course, it's an important section, but it's just really good if you have questions about how can I optimize my website for my users, because we all know in SEO these days, when you do something good for your users, Google will obviously pick that up and follow. Just check it out. Today, in the context of today, Core Web Vitals, I already highlighted one section about metrics. That I'm not gonna go in full detail. You can read this section afterwards in your own time. But I would just like to highlight some things about Core Web Vitals on here. So what are Core Web Vitals, or actually Web Vitals? So let's skip the core just for a second. It's basically a set of metrics that Google and browsers are capturing when someone enters your website, visits a web page, requests a web page. There's a bunch of metrics that they're capturing to see how that page is perceived by that user. So doesn't mean if a website is fast for me, doesn't necessarily mean by default that Courtney will have the same page load times. We live in different places, use different computers, have different extensions, you name it. Like there's a bunch of things influencing, outside things influencing the experience you get on a website, and this takes that into account. So for I'm a very visual guy, so I was looking in preparation for this webinar into a more visual representation, and actually I found this one, which is a really good one, by Adi Osmani, someone who is working in the Chrome team, so he's one of the core developers of Google Chrome, and especially on the performance side of things. And he made this beautiful representation of all the Web Vitals. Again, I'm not yet at the Core Web Vitals, which is a subset of the Web Vitals. These are all the Web Vitals that Google Chrome is capturing. I'll do a quick run over them. Again, this is fairly technical, but when you visit a website as a user, there's a couple of things happening, obviously. Sometimes you even see it happening in front of you, but generally you start from a white page, like nothing happens, and then the first byte comes in. So you go to a website server, or at least your browser goes to the website server, requests that web page, so the first byte comes in. That's first byte is a metric that is being tracked. Then there's next step, first paint. The first time something appears on the website, like can be a box in this case. I don't know if it's very visible in the stream, but the first thing that is drawn on the screen, let's say, that's the first paint. Then the first contentful paint is really where more things are being drawn in your browser screen, and this is really where, as a human being, you see, okay, there's something happening. Like there's a website behind this. That's the first contentful paint, and then one step further, step 4, is the largest contentful paint, and this is one of the Core Web Vitals. I'll get to that in a second. This is really where a user can see, okay, there's an actual web page with content. Like this is a web page that makes sense to me as a user with my eyes. That's the stage in the loading of the web page where you'll actually start seeing things that matter. Then there's the first input delay. That's step 5, where sometimes, like you when you scroll on a web page or try to interact on a web page, nothing's happening yet. Even if you click or scroll, nothing's happening yet. So first input delay is a metric that defines that. Then there's speed index, time to interactive, when a page starts actually doing things. And then the last one, also an important one for Core Web Vitals, is the Cumulative Layout Shift. So this can happen at any time, not just when a page loads. Let's say when and in this example, a banner on the top of the page suddenly pops in, and your entire web page gets pushed down, and you try to click on a button, but right when that appeared, you missed it. Like this is also part of the Core Web Vitals, because this is important. Like if you have your web page jumping around a lot because things start getting added in, that's not always a good user experience. So I hope I didn't lose too many people already, but don't worry too much about these things. But this is when people talk about the Web Vitals, these are all like the 7 Web Vitals that Chrome is tracking. So now let's get back to our web.dev resource. Again, very good resource to get your information from. So 7 Web Vitals, but Google actually extracted 3 out of those 7 into a subset, the Core Web Vitals. And these are the ones that they've been very vocal about and have been saying for many months now that by May, when they do a big update to their search algorithm, the Core Web Vitals, those will be taken into account when looking at the page performance of a website, and will eventually use these Core Web Vitals, these 3 metrics, as part of the algorithm to rank your website in search results. So those 3 are the largest Contentful Paint. So remember the first time, or how long it takes for a browser to load significant things on your website, like again to the human eye. Then there's the first input delay. So when's the first time a page is loaded and you can start clicking things? That's first input delay. And then the cumulative layout shift is where things pop into your website and all. I think they have a detail page on that thing alone, where they give a beautiful example of some kind of shopping cart where suddenly a banner pops up and buttons get pushed down and you accidentally clicked on the wrong one. So this is something obviously you don't want your users to experience. So things jumping around is another metric that gets taken into account when you run these metrics on your website. All right, so this is in somewhat of a nutshell the what the Core Web Vitals are all about. So 7 Web Vitals, out of which Google picked, well, not randomly, of course, but they picked the 3 most important ones to that define what a good page experience to an end user, to a visitor is to you. All right. Anything to add to that, Courtney? You're on mute, by the way.
I know. I just found the unmute button. No, I'm learning a lot. I don't know about you guys. There is a live question that just came in, which we are going to tackle in a little bit more detail a bit later, but just to maybe break things up a little bit. Susie is watching, and Susie said, for me, what I've noticed, page speed insights is super harsh. I consider about a 70 on desktop great. Don't really know what to think about mobile. All sites score poorly. Does anyone else have any input on that? Which I think is a great segue into the next kind of portion of what we're going to do here today. Nels, what do you think?
So maybe specifically to that question, indeed, it's always hard with scores. What is a good score? What is a bad score? A good score for one person can be a bad one for another. For page speed insights specifically, I'll just open that here. Is also a tool from Google in which indeed you can test any website. I think it's really I don't want to say any number like this is a good or a bad number, because that's really it's in the eye of the beholder, I would say. the way I prefer to treat scores is I start, like, I see my current website, and this is I have a certain score, let's say 60. That's my baseline to start from when I want to make improvements. So if I start doing certain improvements, like I improve my images, or I do something in my JavaScript or my CSS, then Etsy scores pretty low indeed. A little bit unexpected, I have to say. But if I were to be Etsy, I would take this score to 29 to start from, and improve my website, and hope to get it to 30, to 31, to 40, etc., etc. So that's don't fret too much on that score you have right now. It's better to increase it in gradual steps, and take that as a baseline, essentially.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to, as always, for people who watch the webinars a lot, I have to do my shameless Woorank plug right now. It's not only just page speed insights that you can look at. I mean, Woorank does have a performance section that you can get kind of a more holistic view of what would be slowing down your site, maybe like a more overview. Are there, assets that aren't being cached? Are there, sort of the things that you yourself can fix? And then we have guides that you can go in, very actionable advice, very digestible for even people who are not super technical. So a couple more live questions coming in before we move on to the next section. Matthew from West End Gallery wanted to know if any of the core web vitals are more important than the others. For instance, his LCP and TBT are great, but his cumulative layout shift is scoring very poorly.
Yeah, so that's really hard to comment on in this live stream, because then I would need to dive down into the actual website and see what's going on. I think again, or I refer again to web.dev as a great resource to see. I mean, there's actual examples and best practices in here to explain why they're scoring it in such a way, and what you can do about it. Typically in the CLS, so the metric he's talking about, the amount of, so not only the amount of things jumping into your page, but also the distance they take, if I can say it, phrase it in such a way, also makes or has a certain importance. Like if you have big banners jumping in, they will score you lower than if it's just a small little line at the top or at the bottom or whatever that doesn't shift your web page too much. So this is really a case by case thing that we need to look at.
There's another one from Demetrius about AMP. I'm going to put a pin in that because we are going to talk about AMP a little bit later. So stay tuned, Demetrius. Stay tuned.
Yep. And maybe because indeed we already get pretty, and there was a good comment indeed at Etsy. So there's in PageSpeed Insights, you could look at mobile and at desktop, and oftentimes like desktop is great, mobile is much worse. So yeah, there's already a big difference between mobile and desktop views, but also there case by case, what's important to your website, to your business, to your bottom line. Do you have mostly mobile users, desktop users? Like these are all things to take into account when improving your performance. And then another thing I'd like to point out is the fact that, well, for some reason it's in Dutch here, so I apologize for the English speakers. But at the very bottom, they talk about lab data. And this is something I see, a lot of mistakes made against, is treating things like PageSpeed Insights that uses Lighthouse, which is another tool from the Google Chrome team, which you can also use, by the way, from within Chrome. You don't have to go to PageSpeed Insights website. But these tools, they are based on lab data, which means it's not data, the opposite of that, field data. So field data is your users coming to your website, having a certain experience, which can be entirely different. Like I said earlier, coming from different places around the world, using different browsers, different internet connections. All those things matter when it comes to load times and metrics. But that's field data. So the more data you'll or the more users you get to your website, the more field data you'll get. Lighthouse, PageSpeed Insights uses lab data, which kind of fixes the state of things. So when I run Lighthouse, I run it in my browser on my internet connection. Again, like it might be, I might see a score of 30, whereas Courtney can see a score on the same website of 40 or 60 or 10. So don't treat lab data as the fixed data. If you see, oh, my site scores 30 on something, like that is my website score. No, that's your website score within your browser, on your connection, etc., etc. So again, use that as a baseline to start improving your website. It doesn't mean necessarily, I mean, okay, 30 is not good. That's something you need to work on. Another user might experience your website as a 60. So it's just treat that as your baseline. So, okay, I start from 30 today. I make changes to my website. I improve some images, for instance. I run it again. Okay, it went to 35. I did something good. So I won't ditch it again. If it goes to 25 or just anything lower, well, okay, I probably made a mistake, or I shouldn't have done that. Let me roll back to what it previously was. So this is very important to understand and to know when you're using tools, looking at, okay, where do they get their data from? Is it lab data? So does it pull it out of my browser, my context, or field data? Does it look at an averaged out value of all users across the internet using and visiting my website? Very important. So PageSpeed Insights, uses lab data, I assume, just by running Lighthouse on a certain set of servers from a certain area in the world, and getting that data out.
And do you want to move on to showing an example of that, how we can both run?
Yeah, sure. Let's do Etsy again. So I can run it on my computer.
And then I'll simultaneously run it on mine, and then we can show you guys exactly what we're talking about.
We'll do it in Chrome in an incognito window. So it's the cleanest version of our browsers. No extensions, no ad blockers, no nothing. The cleanest version of how I perceive Etsy. And in the Chrome Developer Console, there's a tab, an application called Lighthouse. I'll just run the performance because that's what it's all about today. Performance report. Start generating that.
I'm running mine at the same time as I'm doing it the exact same thing at the same time as Nils, so that we can show you guys.
So I'll switch over. This is
in the
Courtney's
same
computer.
country. Yeah, so we're on my computer now. I'm also in incognito, so it's the cleanest version as well. But it just goes to show you, I think Nils and I are like maximum probably like 30, 40 miles apart from each other right now. And we're going to probably get pretty different results.
Yep. So I'll switch to mine because my report is ready as far as I can see. Yep. So
my computer's already breathing really hard. So
so in my context, in my browser, my connection, Etsy scores a 45. Not the greatest, but it's if I were an Etsy developer or someone responsible at Etsy to do performance, this is my baseline now to start working and improving certain things.
Mine is nearly loaded. I'm just gonna defer to Cabin Teely Brewer. I'm sorry, Cabin Teely, you show up to most of the webinars and I always butcher your name. I'm really sorry. Wanted to know if the mobile page speed actually affects the ranking for desktop.
Well, actually, I think the answer is already in the question. So, the way Google search results work these days, it's not just 10 blue links anymore that are the same to everybody typing in the same query. It's so personalized these days based on your location, but also based on what machine you're on. And so I assume, I mean, I'm not Google, or I don't work at Google, so I don't know the exact answer, but my assumption, my educated guess would be that, well, if I'm on a mobile phone running a query, and your website kind of answers that question or that query and scores good on a mobile phone, then I assume somewhere in the Google algorithm and the decision-making process of putting your website in a certain position, having a good mobile page speed will have effect for users, mostly for users that are on a mobile phone. So yeah, and the other way around. And also, I assume there will be some overlap, but every improvement to both desktop and mobile will have a positive effect on your rankings, of course. And that again highlights the fact, our mobile use, like, what's the most important to you? Like, do you have a website that's mostly visited by mobile users or mostly by desktop? Like, that's the decision you have to make on your own.
For sure. And you can share my screen as well now. So you'll remember that Nils got a 45 when he ran it. If you share my screen, so mine was a 24 so you can see that, in the example of the lab versus field data, like, we have very different results because we have different internet connections. We're on different machines. All of that stuff does factor into it. So as Nils has mentioned, and as we've tried to reiterate a couple of times, take this information kind of in its own ecosystem. Like, this is what it's resulting for you, but this isn't like Bible for what is going to be performing for everybody. And also, just notice here, if you look at this developer tool, like, this should look pretty familiar from you. The first frame that Nils showed, this is actually what Google is seeing as well. So, all right. Let me go back. My computer is struggling here. All right, so I guess to add on to that, if you want to tease some real user monitoring that we were going to talk about before we talk about some very exciting new stuff that Woorank has to offer.
Well, I suggest you go first.
Let's flip it.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So let me share my screen again. Nils, if you could just pop my screen back up onto everyone. Okay, cool. So most of you, I hope, should recognize the screen that I'm on right now. This is your project dashboard. If you don't, sign up for Woorank, 14-day free trial. You can have a demo with yours truly, blah, 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 marketing. Anyway, so now here we are on the Woorank project dashboard. So a new element, a new feature that we have, which is so exciting, that we've just released, is called the Woorank Assistant. Now, the Woorank Assistant is going to be a way for you to gather all of the super powerful Woorank data without ever having left your site. So you can see here in your navigation, you can immediately go right to the tab here and see the assistant. Once you've successfully installed it, this will turn green. You can see, okay, great, now I can go actually use the assistant. We actually have some pretty helpful instructions here in the project settings. It might be a bit intimidating, but actually it's not really that hard to install. You could use Google Tag Manager or another method. We have a full instructions installation guide in the settings page. And this is your unique code. It's very easy. If you have a little bit of trouble, just email support and we can help you get set up. That said, this is what it's going to look like on your site. Let me just reload here. Hopefully it pops up. Okay, hold on. It was there before, I swear. Okay, here we go. So you can see down here in the bottom corner, it's a very non-intrusive little piece of information for you here. So you can expand that, and then you can get a page level analysis of any page on your site. What's even really cool about this is even if Woorank specifically hasn't crawled that site or that page of that site yet, you can actually force it to just crawl without having to go and revisit Woorank and recrawl the site. You can actually force it to do it in that moment. What's really amazing about this is we have all of that powerful data that we talked about. So all of these metrics that you really need to see for each page You can see the full report. If you pull that up, you can see exactly what's going on, what numerical score out of 100 points each page has been given. You can filter it just like the normal reviews to just see the areas of improvement. You can also expand to see, okay, what's wrong with my meta description? This is red. Why is that wrong? We have a full explanation of why that would be wrong. You can also improve and filter by improvements and errors just very easily by clicking those tabs, so you don't have the full review to kind of weed through. And if you make an improvement and you immediately want to see if something has been fixed, you can refresh the page. Now, in the context of what we're talking about today, which is really mostly performance metrics, we also have these really cool tabs here. So if you want to look at your speed tab, you can in the moment see exactly how quickly your page is loading. Just give it a minute. And while it's loading, just again, reiterating the difference between the field data versus the lab data. What we're looking at right now is the field data, because this is an amalgamation of all of the different data that we have. This is like what a general user would be seeing. So it's not dependent, I guess, on my own internet connection. This is coming from Woorank. So this is different than the lab data that we spoke about.
Yeah, this is actually how your users are perceiving your website. So it makes averages of all the users that are coming to this particular page in this case, so to the homepage of this website, and then drawn out over time and averaged on how quickly, and then obviously you can filter down. Well, not yet, but it is coming. You can filter down on country and certain other metrics.
Right. And just to put my marketing hat back on for a minute, right now for limited time, this is actually free for any of our users because we want to gather more information about how useful this is for you, if there's anything that we can do to make it better. So if you haven't installed it yet, don't waste time. Definitely do it now so that you can start giving us helpful information and so that you can get this really advanced groundbreaking tool totally for free. Just another thing to note, if you're hesitant about it, this little widget type thing here is only visible to your eyes if you're logged into your Woorank account. So this isn't something that like people visit your site and they'll automatically see the little Woorank logo. It's not like that. This is just for you. It's not going to be intrusive for your visitors at all. So that said, should we move on to a little sneak peek?
Yep. So before I switch to my screen, big disclaimer, what I'm about to show is still a little bit early in product development. So it's not in our product just yet, but it is coming. So based off or kind of building further on what Courtney just showed in the speed tab thingy from our assistant, we will improve this because now it's quite minimal, quite light. So we will have some extra, or we will do some extra processing on the data of how your users are perceiving your website. So one type of graph to look at your metrics would be this. I assume many people recognize this, a bell curve. So looking at 100% of your users, in what percentiles page load speeds are happening. So for instance, in this particular example, the median, so 50% of your users load this particular page in less than 3.37 seconds, and so on and so forth. So this gives you kind of a beautiful way to see, okay, where are the majority of my users? And I think Google usually speaks about do or try to improve for 75% of your users. So make them happy. So P75, as they call it then. So that's what we're still working on today. But this will be something will surface within the assistant. And then also another metric that, or kind of projected it differently over a timeline, so that you can also see the moment you start making improvements. For instance, when I changed something on the 21st, did that change something to 90% of my users or 50% of my users, etc., etc. So this is a good timeline to see per page what's going on with the page load times for all the people that have visited your website. So voila, quick sneak peek of what's coming.
Yeah, we're always brewing something up behind the scenes here at Woorank, if you haven't already realized that. Great. Well, I think that that's been a lot of information to be given in a little amount of time. I hope that everyone found that super useful. I think what would be best is if we start taking some of the questions that we had pre-submitted, because really great question got submitted. A lot of them are going to be incredibly and increasingly relevant leading up to May. So the first question, I think, Nils, you already put it into the chat here. Does the current Lighthouse report cover Core Web Vitals already, or do we need to go beyond Lighthouse recommendations?
Well, yeah, the simple answer to that is that yes. Other than, I think, well, anyway, it's always a good start to look at Lighthouse. So they give you a score, again, that baseline lab data score to start from, and then a bunch of a bit like we do in the Woorank reviews, a bunch of recommendations. So things that are good, obviously you don't have to fix those, but then warnings, things that are okay but could be done better, or things that are really an error or are really hurting the performance of your website. So indeed, like the first thing or the first place to start for me would always be Lighthouse. You have that sitting in Chrome. There's some hosted versions on the internet too, so it's really easy to check out. It's free. I mean, it comes with Chrome. And it's a great resource for information about your website. So yeah.
Okay. Next question that was submitted: what is your stance on good vitals but with a bad page speed insight score, like below 40? Do you think it counts in the May update, or the Core Web Vitals in Google Search Console? Is that the data that we should be looking at?
Yeah. So about Google Search Console specifically, next week we have another webinar scheduled that will dive way deeper into the Google Search Console part about Core Web Vitals. So I don't want to already spill the beans there. Obviously, Google Search Console will provide you field data, so how people in the field and crawlers in the field, in this case, like Google, perceive your website. So that's a good one to look at. What is a good score? Again, I don't want to name numbers because I don't want to, afterwards be the guy that said this number and it's actually this number. I think the simplest way to look at it is the way Google represents their data. Red is bad, orange is okay, and green is good. So the more you can get in the green, the better, I would say.
Yeah, please don't throw out specific numbers because I'm the one that handles the customer emails.
No, and I understand, and that's always the danger with any score. Basically, like you put a number on a screen, on a report or whatever, and people like grasp onto that. And again, there's always nuance. Like maybe for you a 60 is just good enough, but that's really dependent on the situation you're in. And I can't stress it enough. Don't use it as, oh shit, my score is this. No, like this is your baseline, and use that to increase and to improve your performance. That's way more important to just start from that number. Don't look too much at what the number is, but this is the starting line, and how can we make it better?
Great. So Demetrius, I know you've been waiting patiently for us to start talking about AMP. So Demetrius wanted to know, I use AMP. Sometimes I think I'm literally the only person using this framework. Another question kind of regarding AMP as well is like, if I built AMP pages, do they currently, or will they meet the current thresholds for Core Web Vitals? But I think there is some news brewing about AMP anyway, so.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and as we were preparing this live stream, it's definitely one I wanted to pop up. The reality is that I don't really know for sure what's going to happen to AMP. Obviously, it's not going away, so don't worry about that. Now, at the same time, the one thing I'm wondering myself is the moment Google announced AMP, they announced it when, and in Google search result, like they actually gave you that little icon with the lightning bolt. So it kind of looked different in SERP. So they really like, and they were on top, and so they were really promoting AMP pages because obviously they host them themselves. It's super fast. It's super everything. What I foresee, again, I'm not predicting the future, but what I foresee is that at one point they might be, when looking at so ignore AMP for a moment, like looking at websites and showing search results, they might maybe even add an icon for websites with a good core web vital score. Who knows? I don't, but it might just be. That's the kind of things they've been doing throughout their entire history. Like how do we show things differently that should be surfaced better in our SERP results? So at one point, I might see kind of a little war going on SERP pages where AMP and pages with good core web vitals will have to fight each other too. So where it used to be a bit like, okay, if you have AMP, almost for sure you'll end up quite high in the search results. Maybe now there's some competition for AMP pages, and the competition will be pages with a good core web vital score. I don't know. Definitely interesting to keep monitoring and keep looking at. So I don't, unfortunately, have a good answer to your question, but AMP specifically is something that's on my radar now to really keep monitoring and seeing how Google is treating these pages.
Okay, Demetrius, I hope that slightly answered your question. The next one that we had pre-submitted, my website is mobile friendly, but my core web vital score is low on mobile. How is that possible? So again, some more stuff about mobile.
Yep. So that's another good question, and I understand the confusion. There's of course a difference between a mobile-friendly website, which generally mean, or when you look at what metrics and what things are we looking at when we decide a website is or Google decides a website is mobile-friendly, it's more about things like readability, having buttons that are big enough to click on with your thumb, things that are not overlapping, stuff like that. So a very slow site can be mobile friendly, like a very slow site with good contrast, good buttons, things that don't jump too much. So it can be mobile friendly, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a fast website. Of course, friendliness also entails performance, but the two are not, I mean, there's no like one-on-one overlap. There is some overlap, but it doesn't mean that your site, when your site is mobile friendly, it's also performing well. So those two are still different from each other, and should, like the performance, the improvements you do to them should still be treated a little bit differently, or you should work on both, so to say.
All right, next one, and thank you to my Woo friends for putting these in the chat for me so that my computer doesn't blow up. How do Core Web Vitals account for sites whose user base might be older or they're using slower networks?
Question I need to think about a little bit. So first of all, maybe I digress a little bit from the question, but so when you run Lighthouse within Chrome or even PageSpeed Insights, I think they use, I don't know exactly anymore, I need to look it up, but they already use some oldish type of emulation of a mobile phone, Moto G something, so pretty old device. That's also, I think, what explains those big differences between the mobile and the desktop version of some websites, like we saw with Etsy. Like I got a 94 on desktop, whereas I got a 30 or even below 30 for mobile. Like huge gap between those. So another way to think about it is like, okay, how do I treat old devices? So I think taking the fact that Lighthouse runs as an old device, like, do I need to load everything for old devices? Like, is there a way I could leave stuff off my website for mobile devices, for older? Again, are old devices important to your website, to your business? If so, like if that's really important to you, then you should probably consider, okay, maybe for mobile specifically, I need to change some things to my website and make it a little lighter to those users.
And folks, we only have 2 more pre-submitted questions left. So if you are just dying to ask Nils, and specifically Nils, not so much me, if you're dying to ask us something, now's the time to throw it into the chat. All right, so the next one would be, when I look at Lighthouse, I see no errors. Why do I see errors on the Search Console report?
Probably a question you'll get into next week in a webinar next week. I'll already give the short version, and I'm sure that Adam, who will be doing that webinar, can go way more into detail because he's more knowledgeable on Google Search Console. But my assumption would be that if I run Lighthouse on my machine, again, that's my context, that's my browser. I might have a new computer or a recent computer, so I have a good score, not too many errors showing up for me. Whereas Google Search Console looks at how their crawlers and just again the field data, how a bunch of machines, however you want to call them, are perceiving the website. And those might be slower machines or might be in an entirely different context. Like your website might be hosted on servers somewhere in Europe, but are requested by machines, crawler servers somewhere in the US or Australia or wherever, and might have an entirely different perception of your website. So that might explain the difference. And again, it's really important to make that distinction between lab and field data. So Lighthouse, lab data, your computer, use it as a baseline to improve. Field data, how is the internet perceiving my website? Different way to look at things, but yeah, a good way to look at things, because that's actually when it goes in the field, what is actually happening now. So use both in the right way.
Yeah, and we'll give you a little bit more information about the upcoming webinar once we're done taking questions. But Nils makes a great point. We are going to be going into sort of the more like practical, what can you do with this information? How can you get ready stuff next week? So last pre-submitted question is specifically about the cumulative layout shift in advertisements. So it would be interesting to know what further guidance there might be for websites that are running ads. It seems that there are 2 options to satisfy that CLS: either turn off your dynamic ads, which negatively affects revenue, or reserve specific dedicated space for ads, potentially leaving a lot of white space on your site.
Yep. So good question. I'll contextualize it a bit more, maybe for people not super familiar yet with CLS. Hopefully after the webinar today, there will be a lot more. But the question is indeed around, okay, I have a website that loads ad banners. And yeah, sometimes ads are slower than the other content on my website. So what happens if I have ads and they push my website, like they're on the top of my website page, and they push stuff down? Like, I don't have full control over those ads. Like, that's a third party. They load on my webpage as they come. What to do about that? And to perfectly be honest, I'm not sure how to answer that question yet. This is something I would need to do some more research about, and I guess we can discuss that with Adam, who will run the webinar next week, and can dive into that question, because I'm not super familiar with ads on websites myself, so I'll need to do some more research. I'm not able to answer that at this moment.
That's fine. Just for everyone who's watching, just know that like we are continuing on our Core Web Vitals content theme into next month. We want you to have all of the ammo, so to speak, to be ready for this. Right now on our blog, we already have some intro. We're also doing full in-depth articles about what these 3 different core metrics mean. There is already one on the Cumulative Layout Shift if you want to just educate yourself a little bit more about what that means and why these sorts of things occur. But for sure, we can look into doing something that's ad specific, just to have a little bit more specific content for you once we know a little bit more about it. We did get a live question in from Neil, which I think actually goes to the core, no pun intended, of this webinar. Why do you care? Why do we care about this? So Neil says, why there's so much going on with Core Web Vitals these days, but Google already did take site performance into account, right? So is the difference just that they're now transparent about the metrics? Or do you expect this to be a big shift in ranking, or will content and link building remain king for SEO? So again, core of the question really is like, why should we care about the Core Web Vitals?
And I see like it's a 2-part question, and I think that the part is the difference just that they are now transparent about the metrics is the answer to the question, I think, where Google used to be very closed about what's going on in their algorithms, very black box. Like as outsiders, as SEO people, we had to kind of reverse engineer Google ourselves and on how to do good SEO. I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen Google being much more vocal about how to build good websites to rank better. Like they now you have this web.dev resource, but they have a couple of others now. Like as far as I can remember, a couple of years ago, Google never used the word SEO. Like that was something they never talked about, as far as I can remember. So there might be people now saying, no, you don't know what you're talking about, but that's my feeling about it. In the more recent years, they actually now have guides around SEO, like actually using the words or the term SEO. And I'll quickly pop my screen back up over here by doing this. So the Google Search Central, kind of a help resource for Google, is also around for a couple of years, but the term SEO is now everywhere on these pages, and that's something, to me at least, feels very recent. So they've become more open about what it means to have a good website that ranks well. Probably because also they were a bit forced or feel the pressure from a bunch of authorities kind of blaming them that they're way too closed ecosystem, too black box. So this is probably a way for them to at least lift the cover a little bit. And I think the same applies to Core Web Vitals. So they probably indeed, and I'm actually just paraphrasing your question, because indeed they already took performance into account. Like they have millions of websites with Google Analytics installed on them. They have tens, maybe hundreds of millions of people using Chrome. They know how fast the website loads already for many, many, many years, and they can use that in their algorithm. But I think now them being vocal about Core Web Vitals is for them a way to be more open about what they're looking at when they're making their decision in giving your website a certain position for a certain search query. And of course, it's an illusion to think that Google is gonna be very open about how they weigh in that performance against other things like backlinks, and that's then the second part of the question. So, is it gonna make a big change? To be really honest, and this is my personal view on this, and again, people can have entirely different different opinions about this. I think, and at least in the beginning, it won't make that much of a difference. I think if you see the chatter right now going on in the SEO verse on the internet, maybe there's a little too much focus on performance now, because of course it's a hot topic. Google's gonna rank that or bring that in their algorithm in May of this year. So people are on edge to do something about their performance. But my personal advice would be, don't expect too much from this. So if you put a lot of effort in the performance of your website, obviously do that. You owe it to your users, to your visitors. So definitely, I mean, I'm definitely not saying don't do it, because it's not going to matter, but do it for your users. That should be your first concern, and then Google will pick that up. But if it's going to make a big difference in how you rank, I don't think so. Especially not in the beginning. Usually when they do these big announcements and big algorithm changes, where they're more open about what they're going to change. So because sometimes they do algorithm changes where they don't say anything. What you see is definitely in the first couple of months, there's actually not that, like the mobile friendly algorithm change, mobile first, change. It took many months for that to pick up and start showing that it had some impact on your search results. So it's not that, or at least I don't expect that in May suddenly search result pages will all shift and be entirely different. I think it will be a gradual change that they'll introduce. But again, performance, super important. So do it for your users, don't do it for Google.
Yeah, I think that's a point that we should really stress. Why should you care about Core Web Vitals? Because it's good for your users. I mean, Google really wants your users to have a good experience, because they're the ones that are like, hey, go visit this site. Like, if your site sucks, then Google looks bad for recommending you. So, I mean, there's that to take into consideration. But your users, I mean, you always want to be crafting your content so that your users have great authoritative content that is useful for them. You want your site to load quickly because your users want a quickly loading site. And as we saw in the video before with the Cumulative Layout Shift, I mean, how that's happened to everybody. I mean, you've been on a site, you try to click something, and then boom, it like jumps on the page. That's super frustrating. Google doesn't want you to be frustrating your users because you can't figure out how to make, your layout not jump around everywhere and make people have a bad experience. So it really, at the end of the day, it's about what sort of content and what sort of website is going to delight the users that they're sending to you. And that's really the thesis statement, I guess, of the day. Just do everything to make your users happy, right? Okay, so it looks like there's no more live questions. I think this has been great. I learned a ton. I know everybody else who's been watching has definitely gotten some new great insight about Core Web Vitals update. As we've teased before, we are going to be going live again on Tuesday. I think that's March 30th. Tuesday, March 30th. That's going to be with me and our head of SEO, Adam. So today we tackled what are Core Web Vitals. Next week we're going to tackle, okay, how do we get ready? How do we figure out what they're going to be looking for? How do I fix anything that, oh, there's a lot of my face there. But you can see it on the YouTube channel. You can go ahead and set a reminder right now. We'll also be sharing links on our social channels. We'll be sharing some teasers with me and Adam so that you can see what we're going to be talking about. Unfortunately for my American, Canadian, South American friends, it's going to be a little bit earlier than this one because Adam's located in Australia. But of course, you can always watch the replay if you're not able to join the live session. Full disclosure though, if you don't join the live session, you can't ask the live questions. So I know I can count on at least some of you waking up a little bit earlier so that we can talk more about Core Web Vitals. But as always, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for your really awesome questions. Thanks for
like buttons.
Hit the like button if you want to see more of our content. If you're not sick of my face yet, hit the like button. You can always see more of our videos. all of our past videos. If you subscribe to our channel, we've got so much content about SEO, digital marketing, performance, blah, 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 blah. It's all on there for you to watch at any time. So thank you again, and I will see you on March 30th at 12 p.m. CET.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.